Maid's daughter rushed to Billionaire. They beat my mom. She's dying. His reaction shocked everyone. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. It was a day like any other when Sarah, a 12-year-old girl, ran through the streets of the city, her heart racing with fear. The usual clamor of the busy downtown area barely registered in her mind. All she could think about was her mother. She had been working at the mansion for years, a housekeeper for the wealthy, and Sarah had grown accustomed to the lifestyle of invisibility. But today, everything was different. Sarah had never been allowed to speak to the family she worked for. She was always told to stay out of sight, to keep her head down and never draw attention to herself. But today, her mother was in danger. Her mother, who had worked tirelessly to support them both, had been beaten by one of the billionaire's guests, a man who had come to the house for a lavish party. The cruelty had been unbearable, and now her mother was dying in the hospital. With no one to turn to, Sarah knew there was only one person who could help. The billionaire who owned the mansion where her mother had worked for so long. She had heard stories of his wealth, his power, and his cold, indifferent nature. But today, she had no other choice. She rushed toward his mansion, her footsteps quick and determined. Her breath came in short gasps as she reached the gates, but there was no turning back. She had to save her mother. The guards at the gate looked at her with disdain as she pleaded for entry. But Sarah did not back down. She had seen enough suffering, enough injustice, and she knew that now she had to be heard. After what felt like an eternity, the gate opened, and she was ushered into the mansion's vast foyer. The grandeur of the place, with its marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and golden trim, seemed almost unreal to her. It was a world far removed from the one she lived in, a world of wealth and power that she would never truly belong to. She was escorted down long hallways, the silence around her deafening. She had never been allowed to set foot in this part of the mansion before, and she could feel the eyes of the staff on her, some curious, others judgmental. Finally, she was brought to the billionaire's office, where he sat behind a massive desk, his eyes focused on the papers in front of him. He looked up, his expression cold and indifferent, as if he had seen too many people begging for his attention. Sarah stood in front of him, trembling, but she did not waver. "Sir, they beat my mom. She's dying. Please, you have to help," she said, her voice barely a whisper. For a moment, there was silence. The billionaire's eyes narrowed as he regarded her, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he stood up and walked out of the room, leaving Sarah standing there, unsure of what would come next. She had done all she could. The rest was now in his hands. As Sarah stood there in the billionaire's office, she could hardly comprehend the gravity of the moment. The silence between them was deafening. He hadn't spoken a word since she pleaded with him, and all she could do was stare at the expensive, polished wood of the desk in front of her. Her heart raced, fear creeping in as the seconds ticked by. She had never imagined this would happen. The man who had the power to change everything had not said a word in response. Just when she thought she might collapse from the weight of the tension, the billionaire stood up. His presence was imposing, his every move calculated, almost like he was testing her. Without a word, he walked out of the room. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. Was he really going to help her mother, or was this just another game to him? She stood frozen, her breath shallow, wondering what would happen next. After what felt like an eternity, he returned. This time, he wasn't alone. A man in a white lab coat walked behind him, a doctor by the looks of it. Sarah's confusion deepened. What was going on? The billionaire's eyes locked onto hers, cold and unreadable. He spoke with a sharpness that sent a chill down her spine. "Follow me," he said, his voice like ice. She didn't know whether to feel relieved or even more terrified. The doctor's presence only intensified the fear she already felt. What was he going to do to help her mother? Was this just some form of twisted charity? She had no idea, but she followed them without hesitation, her every step echoing through the vast halls of the mansion. The further they walked, the more surreal everything felt. The marble floors beneath her feet, the golden accents on the walls, the sound of their footsteps that reverberated through the air. It all felt like a dream. Finally, they arrived at a set of stairs leading down into a basement that looked more like a private medical suite than a part of the mansion. The billionaire motioned for her to follow. Sarah's mind raced with questions, but her body moved on its own, driven by the need to save her mother. They entered a sterile room, the smell of antiseptic filling the air. Sarah's eyes darted around the space, taking in the high-tech medical equipment and the cold, clinical feel of it all. The doctor quickly set to work, preparing some kind of medical device while the billionaire watched in silence, his gaze never leaving her. Sarah was about to ask what was happening when the doctor turned to her. "We're going to save your mother," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Save her mother? What did that mean? Was the billionaire really going to use his wealth to help her? Or was this some twisted scheme to test her loyalty? She couldn't be sure, but she had no choice but to trust them. The doctor began setting up the machines, and Sarah's mind whirled with confusion. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The billionaire's cold eyes met hers again, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something human. "Because sometimes, power isn't enough," he said quietly. "Sometimes, it takes more than money to fix what's broken." Those words echoed in Sarah's mind as the doctor worked. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours, and all she could do was hope. Hope that this man, who had shown her nothing but disdain up until now, would keep his word. Hope that he wasn't just playing a game. Hope that her mother would survive. And then, after what felt like a lifetime, the doctor stepped back and nodded. "She's stable," he said. Sarah let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. The tension in the room finally began to lift. But as the billionaire stood there, silently watching her, Sarah realized one thing. This moment, this unexpected act of kindness, was about to change everything, and she would never forget it. As Sarah sat beside her mother's hospital bed, the events of the past few hours felt like a blur. The billionaire, whose name she still didn't fully know, had kept his word. Her mother was stable, no longer in immediate danger. But something about the entire situation didn't sit right with her. Why had he helped? What did he expect in return? The sterile smell of the hospital room felt overwhelming. The beep of the machines keeping track of her mother's vitals was the only sound that broke the silence. Sarah couldn't help but replay everything in her mind, trying to piece together the puzzle. The cold, powerful man who had never cared for her or her family suddenly acted as if he had a heart. It didn't make sense. The next day, the billionaire sent a car to take Sarah to his mansion again. This time, the ride felt different. The driver didn't say a word as they passed through the grand gates and into the opulent driveway. Sarah was still confused and cautious. She had no idea what to expect this time. When the car stopped in front of the mansion, the doors opened, and she was escorted inside. She felt the weight of the house pressing down on her, as if the walls themselves were judging her. She was led through the lavish halls once more, past rooms filled with treasures she couldn't even begin to understand. This time, though, the atmosphere was different. It wasn't the cold indifference she had felt the first time. There was something almost welcoming about the way the staff greeted her. She was shown to a private office where the billionaire waited. His expression was no longer indifferent but measured, as if he was considering something carefully. "Sit," he said, his voice still commanding but somehow softer than before. Sarah did as instructed, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea what was coming next. He looked at her for a moment, and for the first time, she didn't feel like a mere servant or someone to be dismissed. He looked at her like she mattered. "I'm not going to pretend I did this out of the kindness of my heart," he began, his voice low. Sarah blinked, unsure of where this conversation was heading. "I helped your mother because, for the first time in a long time, I realized something. People like you, they don't deserve to be treated the way society treats them. It's not right. But I also know that nothing comes for free." Sarah's stomach dropped. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and studied her. "I want you to work for me," he said finally. "Not as a maid, not as a servant, but as someone who can change things. Someone who can make a difference. You have a sharp mind. I can see that." Sarah was speechless. The idea of working for this man, in any capacity, felt wrong. But then again, wasn't this what she had been trying to do for so long? Make a difference? She wasn't sure what to say, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this moment would change her life forever. "Take some time to think about it," he said, his voice calm, almost gentle. "I'm not offering this lightly. This isn't a charity, but a partnership, and it's up to you to decide whether you want to take it." Sarah nodded, her mind racing. What was she supposed to do? Was this an opportunity she couldn't afford to ignore, or was it another manipulation disguised as a favor? She left the mansion that day with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. She was no longer the invisible girl she once was. She had power now, and she wasn't going to let it go to waste. Sarah spent the next few days in a whirlwind of uncertainty. The offer from the billionaire hung over her like a cloud. He had given her time to think, but every time she tried to think clearly, her mind would race in circles. The idea of working for someone who had always treated people like her as invisible, a mere tool for his convenience, felt wrong. But then again, his offer was unlike anything she had ever been presented with. He wasn't just offering a job. He was offering her a chance to make a real impact, to use her mind and skills to do something important. Her mother was recovering, and she couldn't help but feel that her mother's situation had pushed her toward this moment, toward something bigger than herself. On the fourth day, Sarah found herself standing outside the billionaire's mansion again. She had made her decision. The door opened, and she was escorted into the mansion with a new sense of purpose. This time, when she walked through the halls, it didn't feel like she was an outsider. She didn't feel the weight of judgment from the staff or the coldness that had once seemed so pervasive. The mansion felt different now. She had changed. She was no longer just the daughter of the maid. She was someone with power and potential. The billionaire was waiting for her in his office, the same room where they had spoken days earlier. His expression was as unreadable as ever, but there was something else in his eyes now, a flicker of approval, perhaps. "I'm glad you decided to join me," he said, his voice steady. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is going to be hard work. The kind of work that demands every bit of your attention, your energy, and your intelligence. But I believe you're capable of it." Sarah felt a rush of determination. She had always been told that she wasn't enough, that she didn't belong. But here, in this room, with this man who had the power to change everything, she realized that she had something to offer. "What exactly am I supposed to do?" she asked, trying to steady her nerves. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "I need someone who can think outside the box," he said. "Someone who can look at problems from different angles. Someone who won't back down when things get tough. We're about to embark on a project that could change everything. An initiative that has the potential to change the way we think about power and wealth. I need you to lead it." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their implications. Let it. Sarah had never thought of herself as a leader, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized that this might be her moment. She wasn't just fighting for her mother anymore. She was fighting for her future. "I'll do it," she said, the words leaving her mouth with more conviction than she had expected. The billionaire nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Good. You're going to be working closely with my team. You'll have access to all the resources you need. But remember, this isn't just about making money. It's about creating something that will last, something that will make a real difference in the world." Sarah nodded, her mind already racing with ideas. She didn't know exactly what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt in control of her destiny. As she left the mansion that day, a sense of purpose filled her. She wasn't the same girl who had run to the billionaire's mansion a few days ago, desperate for help. She was someone different now, someone who could take on the world and make a real impact. And she was ready. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity for Sarah. Her life had transformed overnight. The billionaire's offer was more than just a job. It was an opportunity to change her future and her mother's. As the days passed, Sarah found herself in meetings, surrounded by some of the brightest minds in the world. She was no longer the quiet girl hiding in the shadows of the mansion. She was at the forefront of an ambitious project, one that promised to disrupt industries and challenge the status quo. The billionaire had given her complete autonomy, trusting her with decisions that would shape the direction of the initiative. He had built an empire, but now, he was placing his faith in her to lead the charge. The project was unlike anything Sarah had ever imagined. It wasn't just about creating wealth. It was about changing how people thought about power and influence. She was tasked with developing a strategy that would bring together the world's most powerful leaders, corporations, and philanthropists to solve global issues that had long been ignored. It was daunting, but Sarah was determined. She spent sleepless nights researching, meeting with experts, and refining her ideas. Slowly but surely, the pieces began to fall into place. The billionaire watched from the sidelines, never interfering, but always there, offering guidance when needed. He had seen something in her from the beginning, something that no one else had recognized. His faith in her was both a gift and a burden, but she welcomed the challenge. One afternoon, after months of intense planning and strategizing, Sarah stood in front of a group of investors, presenting the first phase of the project. Her heart raced as she spoke, but her voice was steady, filled with conviction. The room was filled with powerful people, all eyes on her. She could feel the weight of the moment, but she knew this was her chance to prove herself. As she laid out her vision for the future, she saw the skeptical looks turn into nods of approval. By the end of the meeting, the investors were on board, ready to support her vision. Sarah had done it. She had proven to herself and to the world that she wasn't just the daughter of a maid. She was a force to be reckoned with. After the meeting, the billionaire approached her. His expression was neutral, but there was a glint of something in his eyes, a quiet pride. "You did well," he said. Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had earned his respect, and more importantly, she had earned her own. The project was now in motion, and there was no turning back. Over the next few months, Sarah's work became widely recognized. Her innovative ideas and bold leadership began to reshape industries, and soon, she was invited to speak at global forums, sharing her vision with the world. The girl who had once been invisible was now a prominent figure, known for her intelligence, her drive, and her ability to make the impossible possible. The billionaire's influence had given her a platform, but it was her own determination that had carried her to the top. As Sarah looked back at everything she had accomplished, she realized that she had not only changed her own life, but she had also opened doors for others like her. She was no longer just a girl with dreams. She was a woman making a difference. And it all started with one decision, the decision to believe in herself, to take a chance when the world had written her off. She wasn't done yet, though. This was just the beginning. Months passed since the big presentation, and Sarah's life had continued to change in ways she could never have imagined. The project she had launched with the billionaire's backing had gained traction beyond her wildest expectations. She was now a rising star in the business world, an inspiration for those who had been overlooked and underestimated. But even as she reached new heights, she could feel a shift in the air. The weight of success was heavier than she had anticipated. As her profile grew, so did the pressure. People expected more from her now, and the stakes had never been higher. Every decision she made felt more consequential than the last, and the fear of failure was a constant companion. One evening, while Sarah was sitting in her office overlooking the city, she received an unexpected call. It was the billionaire. His voice was calm, as always, but there was a hint of urgency she had never heard before. "I need you at the mansion. It's important," he said before hanging up. Sarah felt a tightness in her chest. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she had learned not to ignore his requests. She got in the car and headed to the mansion, the familiar route now feeling oddly unfamiliar. When she arrived, the billionaire was waiting for her, his expression more serious than she had ever seen it. "I'm not going to sugarcoat this," he began. "Things are escalating. The project is under scrutiny from people we can't control. There are powerful forces at play, and we need to be prepared." Sarah's stomach tightened. She had known there would be challenges, but she hadn't expected things to get this complicated. "What are you saying?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "What do we do now?" The billionaire leaned back in his chair, his eyes hardening as he looked at her. "We fight, but we need to be strategic. There are people who will stop at nothing to take us down. They will use everything they can, money, influence, anything, to undermine what we've built." Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. She had always known there would be opposition, but she hadn't imagined it would be this intense. "I didn't come this far to back down," she said, her voice firm despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "I'm in this for the long haul. But we need a plan. We need to know how to fight back." The billionaire looked at her with a rare look of respect in his eyes. "That's what I like to hear," he said. "I'll give you everything you need. But you have to be prepared. This isn't going to be easy. Over the next few weeks, Sarah threw herself into the work even more intensely than before. She met with experts in legal strategy, business tactics, and crisis management. The billionaire's resources gave her access to the best minds in the world, but it was her own determination and vision that drove the plan forward. The pressure was immense. Every move had to be calculated. Every decision weighed against the potential consequences. She was no longer just fighting for success. She was fighting for her own survival, for the survival of the movement they had created. It wasn't long before the first major battle came. A group of powerful business leaders had come together, using their influence to discredit Sarah's project in the media, spreading rumors and planting seeds of doubt among investors. The attack came fast and hard, but Sarah was ready. She fought back with everything she had, holding press conferences, gathering support from allies, and using her platform to speak directly to the public. The billionaire stood by her side, offering advice and support, but it was Sarah's leadership and her voice that turned the tide. As the days passed, the attacks grew fiercer, but so did Sarah's resolve. The project began to gather more momentum as people saw the strength of her leadership. It wasn't long before the very forces that had tried to tear them down began to falter. And through it all, Sarah realized something. She wasn't just fighting for success anymore. She was fighting for something much bigger. She was fighting for justice. She was fighting to show the world that people like her, people from humble beginnings, could make a real difference. And she was winning. The days that followed felt like a blur, but Sarah could sense the shift in the air. Her fight wasn't just about winning anymore. It had become about something bigger. As the project began to thrive, so did the opposition. The battle lines were drawn, and she had never felt the weight of her decisions more than now. The billionaire, ever silent and watching, had given her the reins, but this was no longer just about business. It was personal. The public had rallied behind her, but the ones who controlled the money, the ones who held the real power, weren't going to back down easily. They had underestimated her before, and now they were realizing that this was no fight they could win with money or influence alone. It was a battle of values, a battle of vision. Sarah had become more than just a leader. She had become a symbol. The media, the public, even some of the world's most influential people were now watching her every move. They wanted to know how someone from her background had risen to challenge the status quo. Sarah had turned their doubts into fuel, and with each passing day, her resolve grew stronger. But then, the attack came. A smear campaign, fueled by lies and half-truths, began to spread like wildfire. The whispers, the accusations, they all aimed to undermine her credibility, to strip her of the very thing she had fought so hard to build, her integrity. The billionaire, who had been mostly silent, came to her with a proposition. "We can fight this with more power," he said, his voice cold and matter-of-fact. "We have the resources. We can make this disappear." Sarah stared at him, her mind racing. "I didn't build this to hide behind power," she said firmly. "I built it because people deserve to see the truth. And if we hide now, we'll lose everything we've fought for." The billionaire's gaze softened, just for a moment, and he nodded. "You're right," he said. "You've always been right. I just wanted to make sure you knew you had options." Sarah had always known the options, but her decision was clear. She would not back down. She would stand tall. The following weeks were some of the hardest she had ever faced. The media attacks came in waves, but Sarah fought back with everything she had. She stood before crowds, told her story, and showed the world that she was not just a product of the system. She was a part of a movement. A movement that wasn't just about the wealthy or the powerful. It was about the people. Her story resonated with millions, and soon, the lies that had been spread about her began to unravel. People started to see her for who she truly was, and the forces that had tried to tear her down found themselves on the defensive. It wasn't just about the project anymore. It was about showing the world that power didn't come from money. It came from conviction. It came from doing the right thing, no matter the cost. And Sarah was willing to pay that cost. By the time the smear campaign finally fizzled out, Sarah had not only won the battle, she had earned the trust of the people. Her project, now stronger than ever, continued to move forward, reshaping industries, challenging norms, and changing lives. She had done what no one thought possible. She had proven that a person's worth wasn't defined by where they came from or what they had. It was defined by what they did with the opportunities in front of them. And as Sarah stood at the helm of a movement that had grown far beyond her initial vision, she knew one thing for sure: the fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The days that followed were a mixture of triumph and exhaustion. Sarah had emerged victorious, but the battle had taken its toll. She had fought harder than she ever thought she would have to, and now, as she stood at the helm of the project she had fought so hard to protect, she found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. The billionaire had kept his word, supporting her every step of the way, but she had become more than just his partner in the project. She had become the face of something bigger, a symbol of resilience and determination for people who had always been overlooked. The world was watching, and Sarah knew that the real work was just beginning. Her project was now a beacon of hope, drawing attention from across the globe. It wasn't just about success anymore. It was about proving that people like her, people from backgrounds like hers, could rise above and make a difference. But with the growing success came the constant pressure to keep moving forward. Every decision she made now had the potential to impact millions, and the weight of that responsibility was never far from her mind. Late one evening, as she sat alone in her office, she couldn't help but feel the familiar tug of doubt creeping in. Was she truly capable of carrying this responsibility? Had she made the right choices? She looked out the window at the sprawling city below, the lights twinkling like stars. For a moment, she allowed herself to remember who she was before all of this began. The daughter of a maid, someone who had never been expected to do anything more than survive. And yet, here she was, leading a movement that was changing the world. The thought was both overwhelming and empowering. Just as she was lost in thought, the door to her office opened, and the billionaire stepped inside. His presence was always commanding, but tonight, there was something different in his demeanor. He stood by her desk, looking at her with a quiet intensity. "You've done more than I ever expected," he said, his voice steady but filled with something she hadn't heard from him before: respect. Sarah looked up at him, surprised by his words. "Thank you," she replied, her voice soft. "But sometimes, I wonder if I'm doing enough. The pressure it's a lot." The billionaire nodded, his gaze softening. "I know. I've seen it. But you've proven something to me, and to everyone. You've shown that it's not about where you come from, but where you're going. And you've already gone further than anyone could have imagined." Sarah felt a surge of emotion rise within her. She had spent so many years doubting herself, but hearing those words from him, someone who had once looked at her with indifference, made her feel like she had truly arrived. He continued, "But now, it's time for you to think about the next step. The world is ready for what you've built, but we can't stop here. We need to expand. We need to think bigger." Sarah's heart raced. She had known that this day would come, the moment when the next challenge would appear on the horizon. But now, she realized that she was ready for it. She wasn't just a girl who had been given a chance. She was a leader, someone who could move mountains if she believed in herself. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. "Let's make it happen." The billionaire smiled, a rare warmth in his eyes. "I knew you would be." The next phase of their project was set in motion, and Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. She had already changed the world in ways she could never have imagined, and now, it was time to go even further. The pressure, the doubts, they no longer held power over her. She was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every person who had ever been overlooked, every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. And as Sarah moved forward, she knew that no matter what came next, she would face it with the same determination and resilience that had brought her this far. As the months went by, Sarah continued to lead the project, but now it was no longer just about her own journey. It was about the legacy she was building, the change she was creating for the future. She had become a beacon of hope for so many people who felt forgotten or underestimated, showing them that their voices mattered, that their dreams were worth fighting for. She had taken on the challenge of transforming not just the industry, but society itself. The movement that had begun as a simple idea had now grown into a global force, and Sarah was at the center of it all, guiding it with a vision that was sharp, unwavering, and grounded in the very principles that had once seemed out of reach. But no matter how far she had come, Sarah never forgot where she started. She remembered the struggles her mother had endured, the sacrifices made for a better life, and the moments when she herself had almost given up. It was these memories that kept her grounded, pushing her to keep going even when the pressure felt unbearable. Every success was a reminder of what was possible, and every setback was a lesson learned. The billionaire had remained by her side, but Sarah was no longer just the person he had taken under his wing. She had grown into her own leader, someone who could now make decisions without hesitation, someone who had learned the true meaning of power, not just the ability to control, but the ability to inspire, to lift others up. One evening, as Sarah looked out from her office window, she saw the lights of the city below, a reflection of the journey she had been on. Her thoughts were interrupted when the billionaire walked in. This time, there was no business to discuss, no new strategy to implement. He simply stood beside her, looking out over the city. "You've done it," he said quietly, his voice filled with pride. "You've built something that will last, something that will change the world." Sarah smiled softly, a sense of peace settling over her. "It wasn't just me," she replied. "It was all of us. Every person who believed in this vision, who worked with me to make it happen." "But you let it," he said. "You made it happen." They stood there in silence, watching the city come to life as the sun dipped below the horizon. Sarah had come a long way from that frightened girl who had once run to him for help. She had fought for everything she believed in, and in doing so, she had become something more than she had ever dreamed of. She had become a force for change. And now, as she looked ahead to the future, she knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. The world was waiting for more. The movement she had started had only begun to scratch the surface, and there was so much more to do. She had a new sense of purpose, a renewed fire in her heart. She was no longer fighting just for survival, but for the future, for a future where everyone, no matter their background, had the chance to make a difference. With a deep breath, Sarah turned away from the window and looked toward the next chapter. She was ready. The journey ahead would not be easy, but she had already proven that nothing was impossible. And as long as she had the courage to keep going, she knew that there was nothing she couldn't achieve. The world had changed because of her, and now it was time to change even more. Millionaire stories often revolve around unexpected success and the journey of overcoming obstacles, and this one is no exception. It follows a young girl who rises from humble beginnings, becoming a symbol of resilience and determination. Her story, which started with adversity and the desire to help her mother, leads her into the world of powerful individuals and millionaire circles. The narrative takes the viewer on a transformative journey, demonstrating how she uses her intelligence, drive, and inner strength to challenge the status quo and fight for a better future. Through twists and turns, Sarah's path reveals the harsh realities of the world of billionaires, where trust is tested and power dynamics shift. But through it all, she never loses sight of her goals, proving that true power lies not in money or status, but in the courage to take risks and stand up for what's right. This is one of those millionaire stories where the unexpected happens, showing that the richest people aren't always the ones with the most money, but the ones with the strongest character. From being underestimated to leading a global movement, her journey is a testament to the fact that anyone, regardless of their background, can make a difference. As Sarah's story unfolds, we see how she navigates challenges, fights against powerful forces, and ultimately proves that wealth isn't the only way to make an impact. The power of this millionaire story lies in its message. True wealth is found in the ability to inspire and change the world around you. These types of millionaire stories remind us all that greatness often comes from the most unexpected places, and with determination, anything is possible.